Riding Freedom by Pam Munoz Ryan, Chapter 3. Charlotte, you look nervous as a cat, said Hayward. Charlotte looked around to see if anyone was watching. She took the bundle he was holding and stuffed it in the wood box behind the kitchen. It's all there, Charlotte. Everything you asked for. The overalls, the cap, the boots, everything. Please be careful, Charlotte. Thanks, Hay. I don't know what I'd have done without you. Hayward was ready to leave. His new family was waiting around front. Charlotte tried to look at him, but she couldn't. She looked at the ground. Charlotte, how will I know where to find you? I know where you'll be, she said. I'll find you again, I promise. Anyway, I've got something for you to remember me. Charlotte took a narrow piece of leather out of her apron pocket. But that's your bracelet, said Hayward. No, I cut it into long ways. See? Charlotte held up her wrist. The leather that she had worn since she was a baby was half as wide. She tied the other half around Hayward's wrist. He was quiet and his eyes were wet. He put his arms around her and buried his head against her apron. Charlotte held him and ruffled his hair. She felt sick inside, like she'd swallowed something spoiled. Now get along. They'll be looking for you. Hayward straightened up. Muddy streaks ran down his face. Goodbye, Charlotte, he said, walking backward, still looking at her. Goodbye, Hay. I'll find you. We're going to have a ranch, remember? With a big old sign that says private property. Remember? And foals every spring. She couldn't finish. She choked on the tears as they spilled down her cheeks. She tried to stop, but she couldn't. They just flowed a river down her face until she couldn't see him anymore. Charlotte sat behind the wood box for nearly an hour. She felt achy and empty. Silent, her tears spent, she looked out over the pastures and wondered where she'd be tomorrow. It would be easy to stay here and just go about her business. At least she'd know where she'd be sleeping every night. She'd have regular meals, but she wouldn't have the things she loved. What did Vern always say? That's the easy way ain't always going to get you anywhere. Mrs. Boyle's voice startled her. Charlotte, do I have to come out there and get the wood myself? You're good for nothing and slow as molasses. Charlotte jumped up and gathered the wood and carried it into the kitchen. She didn't want Mrs. Boyle getting her dander up and poking her nose in the wood box. Not today. When Charlotte walked back into the kitchen and saw the piles of potatoes waiting for her, she realized that as nervous as she was about running away, she was more afraid to stay. Something bigger than peeling potatoes was nagging at her on the inside, but she still needed help to make her plan work, and there was only one person left who she considered her friend. Vern always ate dinner in the kitchen, so afterward, when he came out to the kitchen steps, Charlotte was waiting. Well, Miss Charlotte, I already been missing you, and those horses already missing you too. Charlotte put her finger up to her lips and waved Vern away from the back steps. When they were safely out of Mrs. Boyle's earshot, Charlotte looked at him and gathered her courage. Vern, where would somebody pick up a stage around here? A stage? Well, the southbound picks up in Concord every Tuesday and Saturday morning. So there's one coming tomorrow. You remember Concord. You rode over there with me to pick up some feed. That's about all I know. Why? What are you up to? How much does it cost? Asked Charlotte. Vern studied her. Well, it costs some dollars to get a body to the next stop, but that ain't very far. You got money for a stage ride, Miss Charlotte? Vern, you know I ain't got no money, but I got to leave. I ain't got no good cause to stay here. The only reason they keep me is to take Mrs. Boyle's place in the kitchen. Worried furrows crinkled up Vern's forehead. Running away is a mite dangerous thing to do, said Vern. You ran away once, said Charlotte. Vern tilted his hat back on his head and looked at her. Yes, I did. I never knew my mama or papa, just like you. I ran from the south to the north, and all I left behind was being somebody's slave. But when I ran, I had folks that helped me and hid me. You're a girl. That's different, said Vern. It ain't that different, said Charlotte. Vern looked at her, then toward the kitchen. Well, maybe you're right. If anybody would wither and die in a kitchen, it's you, he said. She straightened her shoulders and looked at him directly. I'm going, Vern. He shook his head, then lowered his voice to a whisper. Miss Charlotte, anybody know your intentions? No. Almighty, you keep it that way. Vern looked around to see if anyone could hear. Now, you got to make it look like lots of things could have happened to you so folks won't know which way you went. And you need to look different. I already got that figured out. I just bet you do, said Vern. I need a pair of scissors tonight, said Charlotte, and some money for the stage. I could pay you back, not right off, but down the line. I don't know what you have in mind, Miss Charlotte, and it's better I don't. Because Mr. Millshark, he'll be asking me about you first thing. I'll try my best to get you those things. You be careful. You hear me? You be real careful. You're heading for Concord, right? So let me think. You know I can't read a scratch, so when you get through the woods and come to the town sign, you pile some rocks up around the base of that sign. That way, next week when I get the feed and I see those rocks, I'll know you made it that far. I'll be worried sick till then. Charlotte smiled at Vern. She would have hugged him too if she hadn't been worried about Mrs. Boyle walking out of the kitchen any minute. She couldn't let anyone think that Vern might have helped her. Thanks, Vern. I wish I could stay with you and work with the horses, but I'd be in the kitchen and I'd be missing Justice and fretting because I wouldn't get to see Charity's full or help you name it. I know, Miss Charlotte, said Vern. You got to do what your heart tells you. I won't ever forget you, said Charlotte. I guess I'm not likely to forget you, Miss Charlotte. And don't you worry about Charity's full. I got me a name all picked out for that one. And you did help me. Just came to me. A fine name that stands up real good, fitting for the fine horse it will be. That foal's going to be named Charlotte's Pride. Charlotte lay in bed in her clothes until after midnight. She thought about Hayward sleeping in his very own bed in his very own house with his new family. She wondered what that felt like, knowing you were home, knowing there were people in the very next room who cared about you. Don't forget me, Hay, she whispered into her pillow. When Charlotte was certain that everyone was asleep, she got up and plumped her pillows and laid them in her bed, covering them with the blankets so it looked like she was still sleeping. She crawled out the window and sneaked to the wood box. Although the night was clear and bright with moonlight, the wood box was in shadows. Had Vern come through? Charlotte opened the box. Inside was Hayward's bundle of clothes. She strained her eyes in the dim light, and there in the corner was another smaller cloth bundle tied with string. She looked back toward the barn. Thank you, Vern, she thought. She grabbed the two bundles and ran as fast as she could until she was beyond the far pasture. The road to Concord was on the other side of the woods, and she would have to hurry to get there by morning. In the safety of the trees, she unwrapped Vern's bundle. He had put the money in a little leather pouch. and there was a sandwich and the shears that they used to trim the horses' manes. But more than that, the cloth they were wrapped in was a worn piece of a shirt that had been crudely hemmed the size of a large kerchief. One side of the kerchief still had the original buttonholes. Charlotte rubbed it over her cheek. She could still hear Vern saying, "You gotta do what your heart tells you." She found a pool near a fast-moving stream. Then she untied her ribbons, unbraided her hair, and shook it hard. It surrounded her shoulders like a woman's shawl. She leaned over and looked at herself in the water. "Goodbye, Charlotte," she whispered. With a trembling hand, she picked up the scissors and cut off a hank of hair. With every snip, long locks landed in the water and floated downstream in the strong current. She had never cared all that much about her hair, but now she ached for it as it disappeared. She dropped her hair ribbons into the water, and like silky snakes, they drifted away too. When Charlotte stood up, she was surprised at how lightheaded she felt, as if those braids had been holding her fast to the ground. She quickly changed into Hay's clothes and put the sandwich and the money pouch in the big pocket of the overalls. She folded Vern's makeshift kerchief and tucked it into another smaller pocket. She took one last look in the pool. The water reflected the image of a young boy. Quickly, Charlotte stuffed her frock and the scissors in the stump of a dead tree, covering them with damp leaves and brush. She floated her apron in the stream, wrapping the strings around the nearby tree brambles so it wouldn't drift away. Make it look like different things could have happened. If anyone came looking, they'd see her apron and think she had drowned. Charlotte cut through the woods and arrived at the main road to Concord with the moon still high. She ran until she got tired, then walked, then ran some more. The stage came early, she reminded herself, but her side had a stitch from running, and she slowed a little. Mrs. Boyle would be fussing when Charlotte didn't show up for breakfast chores on time, but she'd be too busy to come looking herself. Eventually, she'd send one of the boys. He'd see the bed with what looked like Charlotte inside and try to wake her. The boy would report back that Charlotte was missing, and then Mrs. Boyle would be furious. She'd march straight to Mr. Milshark. Charlotte held her side and started running again. She couldn't miss that stage.